This adversity that came into my life changed me, and it changed me for the better. It's made my life incredible. And, we all face it. We all need it. We need it to test us. We need it to make us better. Now, when you're going through it, of course, it's like, it's the worst thing in the world. Why me? How could this happen to me? But we find a way. And it's made me so much better, a person, a husband, a father. Now, adversity is a teacher.
Hey everyone, this is Rod Cate and welcome to this week's episode of Rocket Motivation. This week's guest lost his left leg below the knee as a result of a car accident in 1989 on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. He went from wheelchair to walking with crutches, to walking with just his prosthetic, to running a 5K, to running marathons. He's been a torch carrier for the Olympics and the Paralympics. He's been the role model of the year of the Amputee Coalition of America. But his biggest accomplishment may be overcoming another challenge, but we'll get to that later. We call that a tease in the biz.
3, 2, 1.
Denny Chipollini, welcome to Rocket Motivation.
Well, thank you, Rod. I'm glad to be here.
Great to have you here. So Denny, let's do this. Let's tell the listeners where you are now in your life. How old are you? Where you live? Your family? What do you do?
I'm outside a little town outside Philadelphia called Conshohocken. Born and raised there. I moved away for 30 years with my wife, and then I moved back. My father got sick, and I've been spend the last 4 years with my new wife here in Conshohocken. I have 2 kids. Nicholas, who's 31. My daughter is 27. She lives in North Carolina. She's married, and my son works on films. I'll be 68 in May. I'm a personal trainer, but my clientele right now, because of the COVID, is very limited. They want to work out, so I do work with them.
I gotcha. All right, well, let's go back to 1989. Tell us about the accident you were in and the injuries you sustained.
It was a Saturday morning. I got up and I was going to my parents' house. My father has a beauty shop there. And before I started work at UPS, I was a hairdresser. So I just kept some of my clients for the weekends. I was going down the Pennsylvania Turnpike, got on at the Willow Grove exit exchange, and maybe 3 miles into it, they were working on the road. So there was a lot of water. There wasn't good drainage. And I ended up hydroplaning into a guardrail on the side of the road. The guardrail came through the car, severing both my legs. When I hit it, I knew I was going to hit something. So I'm going sideways, and I just braced myself. When I hit the guardrail, there was that moment of silence. And I thought, am I okay? And I was. And I felt okay. I'm alive. But then a sudden rush of pain came over me. And the reason for that pain was what I saw. And it was my left leg on the dashboard of the car and my right foot with just an artery attached underneath the guardrail on the passenger side. So that was pretty stretched out. When I saw that, the blood just started to gush. I was panicking, and I knew within a few minutes I'd be dead if I didn't do something.
All right. So take us through, what happens there, because we know you're still alive. So take us through what happened.
Yeah, I made it. Well, actually, right there was one of the biggest lessons I've ever learned, and it's the lesson of visualization. Whatever you put in your mind, you can accomplish. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't stop this blood. It was gushing out. So I thought the best way was to bring my heartbeat down. And by doing that, it would slow the blood where I can then maybe hold it with my hand or get a tourniquet. So I visualized myself in a hospital, a couple hours ahead, doctors working on me. And I just saw it. I visualized it. And believe it or not, the heartbeat started to slow up and I was able to control the blood that was coming out and survive. A few people came by. One guy had a T-shirt on. I said, can you take your shirt off? I need to make a tourniquet here. I stayed wide awake through the whole thing, never passed out. The emergency workers came. They peeled back the roof. They helicoptered me to the local hospital, the trauma center, which was Abington. They called my wife, and I told them, please be gentle. She's 7 months pregnant, 7.5 months pregnant. So they told her to come down and hurry up because they didn't think I was going to make it. So,
I said that's not too gentle.
No, it wasn't. Because I remember when she walked in, I looked at her and I remember I said, I'm so sorry, honey. And she went down because there was blood everywhere. It was the start of my new life, I guess you could say, that day.
They obviously attached your left leg.
Yeah, they attached both with external fixators, but they put these rods on the outside to hold the leg together to heal. So I had these two spikes on the bottom part of my almost above my ankles, and then two spikes on the top with almost like an erector set, kind of hooking them together. But what happened was the left leg developed an infection, and that became the issue, whether it was going to heal or not.
Right. Well, how long are you in the hospital, dealing with this before the decision? I know the decision comes at some point that you got to amputate your left leg below the knee. How long are you in the hospital, dealing with these problems, before it's time to make that decision?
I was in a total of 3.5 months, off and on, had to get debrided, but eventually I had it. I had 15 operations. I said, that's enough. Take the leg. I want to move on. And doctors, they're fighting me. They're like, but you're going to lose your leg. I said, that's okay. It's not doing me any good. And I got my way. They took it in April of 1990.
Right. And you said you got your way. So, so tell us about that. That's not an easy decision to make. You're making the decision that okay, I'm going to go through the rest of my life without part of my left leg. So what's going through your mind? What's the thought process here?
Well, it wasn't doing me any good. It was causing me pain, and it wasn't going to get any better. And I made up my mind, but that night, I'll never forget, it was Thursday night because it was a Friday, the operation. And I got a call from a friend of the family's who was a policeman. He had the same type of injury where he broke his below the knee, and it ended up with osteomyelitis, which is a bone infection, just like mine. And he was trying to talk me out of the amputation. So I said to him, Joe, what do you do? What do you do all day? Are you able to walk? He goes, on good days, yeah, with the help of a walker or crutches. I said, what about bad days? He goes, well, I just can sit in the house and look out the window. I said, did you gain any weight? He says, yeah, I put 70 pounds on. I said, Joe, you convince me more now than ever that I'm doing the right thing.
Right.
So I never regretted it. The only thing I was worried about is when I wake up, throwing back the covers and seeing a leg that's missing. That kind of was scary to me, but it wasn't that bad. It was more in my head. And then when it happened, it was fine.
After the amputation, what did the doctors tell you about your prognosis as far as what you're going to be able to do?
Well, I'll never forget that because my parents were there. I think my wife was there too. They walked in the room, they circled the bed, and they said, we don't feel that you're going to be able to ever walk again without the use of some kind of apparatus.
Meaning crutches or a walker?
Crutches or a walker, a wheelchair. And I said, you want to bet? And that I started my rehab at that point. My father was there. I said, Dad, tomorrow when you come up, you bring my 5-pound, 10-pound weights. We're going to start the recovery tomorrow.
Right. You said that's when I started my rehab. Everybody thinks about rehab being physical, and that's most of it. But clearly, just based upon what you said, and I know going through rehab myself, a lot of it's mental, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. What I would do, just like what I learned out on the road there with visualization, what I would do is 20, 30, 40 times a day, I'd visualize myself walking into where I used to work, or UPS. I was a package car driver. I would imagine just walking in front of the cars upstairs to the locker room and getting changed. I just do that over and over again. And I would do this when I started to run marathons. I used the same type of thing. I would run the marathon in my head over and over again. So all I had to do when I got to the starting line or when I got to work is go and do it. I've done it in my head. Just got to act it out. Yeah, the mind is so powerful. And it's really, if you use it as a tool to help you recover, which I did, it really works. Puts the mind and body together.
Right. Well, let's talk about your physical part of your rehab. So, at some point, you get a prosthetic and you get up, you start walking, you start with crutches. Kind of take us through that point until you're actually able to walk and get around, without any assistive device, just you and your prosthetic.
Well, for a real long time after I got home, I would crawl basically on my butt around the floor. My mother came up 5 days a week to take care of me and my son. The good part about this is I got to spend the time with my son. The first 2 years, 2.5 years of his life, I was there, and I wouldn't give that up for anything. He would sleep, and then he'd get up right before my mother would leave. She'd put him on the floor with me, and we just had some great bonding and good times together. He actually walked before I did. But I eventually went from that to a wheelchair. And what I did with the wheelchair, I did 5 to 8 miles through the neighborhood quite a few times a week. And from that, I got up on crutches. That was scary because when I stood up, I wasn't sure if it was going to hold me. I wasn't sure of myself. It was like starting all over again. But I would then start to walk 2 miles a day with the crutches out to a stop sign in my development and back. And it was 1 mile out, 1 mile back. I did that quite a long time and literally cut these sores underneath my armpits that took 6 to 8 months to heal. That's how intense I was on walking again. Eventually, I dropped the crutches and I was able to walk.
Let me ask you about that, because that's a big deal. So now you're going from, using crutches or an assistive device. Now you're all on your own. Take me through the process. What was going through your mind? At one day, you just said, look, enough with the crutches. How did you get there?
Through this time, too, I was getting fit for prosthetics. And unfortunately, one of the toughest things, and it wasn't a good time for me because I couldn't find the right prosthetist to fit me. And the other problem is that your stump is atrophying. It takes almost 5 years to get it down to where it stabilizes. So it was always changing. So I would be fitted for a prosthetic and I wouldn't get it for a few weeks. And all of a sudden it was too big because I atrophied. So then you put socks on. And then if you put too many socks, that was a real struggle for a while.
And did you have falls? Did you fall any while you were trying out the
I
prosthetic?
fell a few times.
Yeah.
Fell a few times, but not too bad. I never really got hurt from the fall. But eventually, I just worked at it. I got a gym in my house and I rehabbed myself. I would get on the life cycle and I couldn't do 45 seconds when I first started because the pain was so intense because my legs were, I had them below my waist. But I just persevered with it because I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to walk again and I wanted to be whole. I just pushed it.
Right. Well, and of course you did way more than walk again. And I think it was 2.5 years after the amputation, you actually run a 5K. I mean, tell me, how do you get from being on the life cycle where you can only do about 45 seconds, then, and walking, with no crutches, but then eventually, you got to run a 5K, you got to run. So tell me about the first day you decide to run. How did that happen?
I was progressing. I'd be out for my walks and then I'd say, I'm going to try to kick it up a little bit. So I'd run for, 10, 15 seconds. And I just each day went a little bit further with the run. And I said, I remember coming in and I knew the town that I was born in, down where I grew up, was having a Oktoberfest. And one of the things they were doing is having a 5K. And I said to my wife at the time, I want to run in that.
What was her response to that?
Well, she was a runner too. She goes, "You sure you're ready for that?" I said, "Yeah, I will be ready." So she actually ran in it too with our son in a running stroller. It was awesome. It was hilly because Conshohocken is all hills, and they didn't spare the hills. But I'll never forget coming down to the finish line, and there was everybody in the town was out there. It was a beautiful sunny day. I finished dead last, but I finished. And I'll never forget, I came across that line. There wasn't a dry eye. That I had chills. I just, it just felt alive. This woman comes over to me and says, "My son would like to say something to you." Little boy, maybe 6, 8 years old. And I said, "Sure." So he comes over to me and I knelt down to him and he kind of looks at me shyly and he says, "Mister, you're my hero." Oh, I fell over. I said, wow, I realized that I've got something here. I've got a gift. I just got to keep using it. And, years ahead from that point, when my son was diagnosed with Asperger and Tourette syndrome, and he was being bullied in school, I knew what I was going to do with the gift that I had.
Yeah.
And I started a nonprofit and started going into schools, speaking about bullying, overcoming adversity, and accepting diversity.
Talking about the word adversity, what's the importance of adversity to you?
Oh, it's made my life incredible. It's made it incredible. And we all face it. We all face it. We all need it. We need it to test us. We need it to make us better. I'm convinced of that. Now, when you're going through it, of course, it's like, it's the worst thing in the world. Why me? How could this happen to me? But we find a way. You find a way. And it's made me so much better a person, a husband, a father now that when I look back. Now, there were some times that were tough, and I'll talk about those. But yeah, adversity to me is a gift. I call it a gift.
Right. Well, let's talk about the tough times.
Yeah, one of the things that came along with this amputation was the dreaded phantom pains. I don't know if anybody's experienced it. Most amputees have. What it is, it's like being electrocuted every 5 to 8 seconds. You're getting shot with this electrical current through my stump up to my brain. And the worst part of it is, it's coming again. So you would tense up, and then all of a sudden the shock comes shooting through. And when storms or barometric pressure, things like that would happen, this could last for days. And of course, I was on pain pills. They never really totally got rid of them. It just dulled them. And eventually the pain pills, I needed more and more and more. And they caused their own pain. If it was 3 hours, they started. Feed me, to the point where I was taking so much that my heart stopped a few times. I would end up in the middle of I'd be driving and I'd stop at a stoplight, and all of a sudden I'd hear horns, and I'm in the middle of the intersection because I passed out. So 3 years ago, I said to myself, that's it. This has to stop. And I decided to quit cold turkey because I didn't want to be a part of the system. Only 5% that goes through the addiction treatment make it. And the problem is they give them more drugs. See, I wanted to feel the pain of addiction. I wanted to feel the pain coming off of it. So I never would want it again. So I would never get into that place again. And I did. I locked myself in my bedroom, and it was about a week of horror.
Okay. So you went cold turkey. You didn't go to some rehabilitation place. You just stopped taking them and locked yourself in your room.
I did. Now, I did check with my doctor. I told him what I was going to do. He didn't recommend it, but he said he'll be available. I had my blood pressure cuff. I had everything, needed in case. But I got through it. There were some times that, I'm like, whoa, do I need to go to the emergency room? But I did make it through. I'd use natural things like herbs and nutrients. And I also use CBD, which was, I feel, a godsend. And CBD is a part of cannabis. It's not the one that makes you psychoactive. THC, that's that. Now, I use that now for the pain. And I can tell you something right now, because Pennsylvania has a medical marijuana. I am pain-free. When I tell you pain-free, I have no phantom pain. I never thought that was going to happen. It took a while to find the right dosage. And what I do is I put it under my tongue in a tincture. And I do that maybe 4 times a day. And it doesn't make me incoherent. It just keeps the pain away. Makes me a little happy, but not too bad.
Hey, well, that's all right. We can all be a little happy.
That is all right. Absolutely.
Hey, but let me ask this, because we kind of glossed over it. When you just said, all right, I'm going cold turkey. Well, first of all, how many years were you addicted? And was it oxycodone?
It was oxycodone, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many years were you addicted to that?
28.
All right, so 28 years. So after 28 years, you decide enough's enough. You lock yourself in the room. Your body's used to this. What happened during that time?
Well, it was as ugly as it gets. I had no control over my bowels. A matter of fact, I could not pee standing up. The sweats, the night sweats, it felt like things were crawling on my skin. The heart palpitations, hot, cold. And that went on. That went on for 5 to 7 days. But then after that, the gut was still, it took months, if not a year, to get my digestive system back to track. And now I've got it working excellent. It was ugly.
I know there had to been times where you said, man, just let me take a couple more of these pills. And apparently you didn't. How did you fight through that?
I just kept using, I just said to myself, do you want to go back to do you want to be hooked to these things for the rest of your life? I mean, I couldn't leave the house without it. They controlled my life. I think it cost me my first marriage. My kids, for a while there, we weren't as close as we are now. I mean, I get along with my ex-wife. I got remarried, and my ex-wife comes and stays at our house. My wife and her get along fine, but it got ugly there. And it just took over my life. I want my life back, and I have it back now. And I wouldn't go there ever again.
And let's talk about, all right, so we know you told the story about running the 5K, which was kind of, your first real run. Then I know you did a half marathon, and then you started doing marathons. How did you get to the point where you're running marathons?
Well, I always thought people that did marathons were crazy. I have to lose my leg to go do one. Before the accident, and that's the thing. The doctor said if I wasn't in the shape I was in, and I was in pretty good shape, I would run and lift weights, I would have died. So exercise is such an important thing, and it was an important part of my recovery. How did I get to marathons? Well, I just progressed. 5K, 10K, half marathon. But every time I was out there, I'd start the marathon, and I'd be like 3 to 4 miles in, and I'm like, what are you doing? What, are you crazy? You still got 21 miles ahead of you. But you know what? You get through it. And what was nice, the support of everybody. Because when I went to a marathon, there weren't, back in the days, this is 20 years ago. Back in those days, there weren't many amputee marathons. Matter of fact, most of the races I was in, except New York, I was the only one. So a lot of people gave me support. They'd run with me, and we just talked and kept each other fired up.
Well, I mean, during these long runs, these marathons, is it ever going through your head, man, I'm not going to make this?
No, and I'll tell you why, because I wasn't going to quit. If I was into the 20th mile, there's no way I'm not going to make it. And I'll never forget my first marathon in San Diego, Rock and Roll Marathon. I'm coming in, I'm 2 miles from the finish line, and doesn't my right leg, which is the good leg, well, not, that's the one they reattached, cramps. So now I was running side to side because the cramp, which felt like I got shot. It took away the pain from the other side because I got to be honest, running with a prosthetic is not easy. And especially in San Diego, it's 90 degrees out. Every couple miles, I have to stop, pour out the blood and the sweat because it breaks open. But with all that said, even though I had that cramp, I knew they would let me finish the races with my 2 kids, like the last 20 yards. So I couldn't let them down. And they're waiting for me, and I can see them, and the mind takes over. It just takes over. And while I'm out there, let me tell you what I was visualizing. I was visualizing when I'm running, and if I got to that point where, oh my gosh, this is so long, am I going to make it? I would visualize the hospital bed I laid in for 3.5 months. I never want to be there again. So again, the mind took over. And then I would meet up with my kids, and I would sprint to the finish line because it just exhilarated me because I completed it. These are things that I would never have had these feelings if it wasn't for adversity. It's a gift.
You've carried the Olympic torch. You've carried the Paralympic torch. Which one was most rewarding to you?
Oh, the Paralympic. I met some incredible people. I met the original Rain Man that Dustin Hoffman portrayed. Kim Peeks, it was his name, because he passed away. But what an awesome group of people, everybody having their adversities, but dealing with them. Yeah, it gave me chills. I was very proud to be able to go out in Utah and run up to Olympic Stadium with the torch.
Well, so what advice can you give to the listeners? All right, of course, everybody goes through different hardships, different adversity in their lives. What advice do you give the listeners who are going through some tough times and facing adversity?
Well, don't give up. Never quit on yourself and believe in yourself. And don't be afraid to go to other people to help you and support you. Because at the beginning, I can do this. I can do this. Oh, no, don't grab the door. Don't hold the door for me. But you know what? People around you are suffering just like you are. And they want to be able to help and be a part of it. And once I realized that, and they did, it became much easier for me to take it on. And I realized that they're hurting as much more than I am. What's interesting, that one adversity that we all have is the fact that we're getting older. There's no way to stop it. I don't care how much money you have, where you're from, you can't stop getting older. It's the great equalizer. But what makes the difference is how we get there. So I say take care of yourself, because it's the only self you're going to have. And believe in yourself, because if you like who you are, you're never alone. You become your own best friend. And I found that. I like who I am now. I didn't always. I'm coming out with a book, and it's a tell-all type thing from my birth till present. And there'll be times, if you're reading that book, you're not going to like me. You're not going to like me. But this adversity that came into my life changed me, and it changed me for the better. That's something I believe we all experience. We all experience. Adversity is a teacher.
Let's talk a little bit more about the book. Have you got a title for it yet?
Well, we're tossing that around. What I'd like to call it is Unexpected Gifts, because all the adversity that has happened in my life, I view them as gifts. But I'm being told that it's not strong enough. People might look at it and not as a strong title to match the story. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, I can kind of see it. I mean, you could even use that title for like a romance novel, Unexpected Gifts.
Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah, that's exactly why. So we're thinking maybe we'll do a chapter called Unexpected Gifts.
I think I agree with your publisher on that.
Yeah.
Well, when I wrote my book too, I didn't have a publisher, and I didn't even try to go through an agent and that kind of stuff. I wrote mine. I wanted to tell my story. I didn't really want anybody's input. I did send my book around to some of my friends to critique it. But I mean, just like you want to tell your story. And in my book, I mean, I don't candy coat a lot of things in there. I mean, I tell people what it's like to go through when you are paralyzed from the neck down, what it's like. And I know just from talking to you and knowing your personality, you're not going to allow anybody to water down your book. So, I'm telling you, I'm looking forward to getting it. That's for sure.
Hey, thank you.
When you go through your stuff, are you a goal setter?
Yeah, I put goals out there. But some of these go, and I reach high for some of them. But here's what I tell people that I've learned too. As long as you set these goals, it doesn't matter if you don't reach the goal you set, but as long as you're headed that way, if you're headed forward, then you're doing something with your life. And that's the key. And we're an example. If you have kids, if you have people that look up to you, we're an example to others. They're always looking. And I realized that when I went out to speak at schools, these kids looked up to me, and I had to be a good example.
So, Denny, if somebody who's listening wants to follow you, hear more about your story, how can they do that?
You can go to my website. It's dennychipollini.com. And there I have all my videos. I'll put this podcast there, everything about me. Also, you can access my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter through there. So that pretty much has everything about me. And they can contact me there too if they want to.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, Denny, this has been just fantastic having you on here, but I like to do this with all my guests. I want to give you the parting shot. If there's something that you're thinking about, something that you hadn't gotten into that you want to tell the listeners, now's the time to do it.
I believe that communication, especially this past year, it was tough. People weren't communicating like they were in the past. We need to do that. Talk it out. Talk it out to yourself. I get up in the morning. I talk to myself all the time because we have the answers. The answers are inside us. Go take a walk. and you can answer most of your questions yourself. It's pretty that simple. It really is. You just have to believe in yourself. I see so many people just giving up on themselves, and it's sad. And that's one of the things I'm trying to, and you're trying to do is pump them up. Let's go. Believe who you are.
Yeah. And that's the whole point of the podcast is I get great people on this show like yourself who have incredible stories, who've overcome just incredible adversities. And here you are, you're telling your story. You're so positive. And if anybody's out there going through adversity or having some struggles, I mean, that's the whole point of this podcast. I want them to listen to you and say, wow, man, if this guy can do this, I should be able to overcome this.
I got to say this, Rod. When in high school, when you're a senior and they give like prettiest hair, most likely to succeed, that. Guess what I got?
What did I
laziest kid in the class. I was so lazy when I got the award. I sent somebody else to go get it for me. Yeah, laziest kid in the class. So yeah, you can change. You can change things. Now I get up at 3 a.m. I love to see the sun come up, get out, and it's been cold around here. But once it warms up a little bit, I go out and do my miles, or I go to the gym. It's important. Keep the body moving. Keep the mind and body together. It's an amazing machine we have.
Well, Denny, thanks so much for coming on. It's been my pleasure. This has been just a wonderful experience for me listening to your story. Just keep it going, man, because you're an inspiration to me and you're an inspiration to a lot of people.
Rod, thank you so much for having me. And you keep going. You're doing good things, man.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Denny Chipollini, the guy's just a warrior, always moving forward. The overcoming physical disability is one thing, but overcoming the opioid addiction, that must have been a lot harder. Well, this week's episode of Rocket Motivation is in the books. Next week's guest is Christy Chastain. She's going to tell you her story of dealing with and fighting cancer. It's going to be a great episode. See you next week. We're really excited here at Rocket Motivation because we've got our first sponsor. Rocket Motivation is now supported by Gat Creek. Gat Creek is a wood furniture maker in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. Everything there is made to order with American pride of workmanship. Now, I know a little bit about Gat Creek because I've got some Gat Creek furniture. I've actually got a cherry bookcase that is just beautiful. I mean, everything at Gat Creek is made of the real stuff. It's all made here in America. I urge you to go to gatcreek.com and see all their furniture, all their designs. I can tell you, you're going to be really impressed. Once again, gatcreek.com. Thanks for listening to the show. If you're interested in getting my book, Get Back Up, just go to Amazon and put in Get Back Up and my name, Rod Caden. It'll pop right up. I would love it if you would subscribe to the podcast and rate and review the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. I would really appreciate it if you'd share it with a friend. I would like as many people to hear my message as possible. And we'll see you next week. Never give up and always get back up.